My name is Wallace Hurlbutt. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel, served 32 years with the Air Force, and moved here and moved into Perry, Georgia, and live right here and have since 1980 in Perry. And I realize now that I am the Grand Marshal of this parade coming up. I'm a little awed by that, but I'm rather pleased and looking forward to it. It should be very interesting and I hope a lot of fun for everybody. Oh, we think it's great. We couldn't have picked a better spot in this location in our city, in this wonderful street that we have here. I must admit it's kind of an awesome thing. This house that we that we own here is such a big, wonderful place, built back in the 1870s, and we spent a good many years bringing it up to what it is today. I call myself a real Perryite now. Support everything going on in this area. I'm very lucky to be here. I just hope there's a big turnout here. We're so lucky, of course, to be here in this wonderful little town of ours. And anything I can do to boost it along and show how thankful I am to be here. Of course, as a military man, I've spent all those many years stationed wherever you might think of. I think I've been there. And you could end up in many places, but this, of course, has been a very lucky break for me. My daughter lives here in Perry, and happily that's just a brief ride away. My son lives in Atlanta, the north end of town, about 2 hours away at the most. He has three daughters, and we're having a wedding for the youngest in July, and I'm not going to miss that one. They're going to look after me to come up there and be there involved in the party. I look forward to that. And another daughter, and is happily married. And the third one, her oldest, at the moment is single, and an artist of great talent. They're working commercially up there in Atlanta. The rest of my family is just sort of memories now. An older brother, much older than I was. The war experiences, he had some adventures there and lived up in Minnesota in the days when he was still alive. We lost him in the 90s. I think I've named just about the major elements involved here. And of course, every member of that family, all of them, have dogs. And when they visit me here, it's pretty exciting. Come October, there'll be a reunion of my old World War II outfit, the 86 Fighter Bomber Group, down in Fort Walton, Florida. They've met annually for many, many years, and as so many of the pilots like myself, we're all about 90 years of age and plus. And it's not a big group any longer, but it's blessed with the descendants of us that show up and gather and listen to our stories and have a wonderful social time of it. Quite frankly, a little aside there, the skipper of the squadron I was in, and our group had 3 different squadrons, lives in Fort Walton, and obviously surviving there, written a few books covering war and so forth. And that made it very special to have our old skipper there with us. And there were 2 of the 10 groups there. There was one that I flew with, shall we say, regularly. So we, living up in New York, when we get together, it can be an awful lot of yarning going on. Somehow the stories get better as the years go on, I suppose. I spent 32 years with the Air Force. I do have vivid memories of the beginning of that period when I was called to service at the beginning of the war. And before the war, we all knew something very important was coming along there in 1941. And of course, with Pearl Harbor, which we're all familiar with, then we knew we were in the war, and everyone was going to serve someplace. And our choices were, you might have a choice, you might not, but the draft boards would decide whether you would be in the Army or the Navy or the Army Air Force. And I was very fortunate to have qualified and took the examination to see if I qualified as an aviation cadet, of all things, which I've never grown up flying, but that was accepted, and that what I went through, that training, and that seemed to go on for a long, long time as we went from base to base and phase to phase, and when you're learning to fly, and it takes different airplanes and different approaches. You just have to be patient with it, and I turned out to be a pilot, I hope a good one, in the end. And I was commissioned as a fighter pilot. I have memories of our finishing our training and then going over to Europe where the war was going on, and arriving over there in October of 1944, as things were moving right along at that time. And we flew out of Italy. And what did we do at that time? Well, we spent a lot of time up in the Po Valley. It seems that the Army was stalled in central Italy, Anzio, and you've heard of names like that. And our job was to keep all supplies for the German people, Army that is, from arriving up there. And so we made it a point to make sure that nothing to help the Germans was going to get down to them. That was our job. And fighter bombers, and we would bomb or shoot or stop or anything that we saw that we thought in our judgment had to be destroyed. And we did that, and did it pretty thoroughly and well. As a matter of fact, we had missions well up there on the other side with Venice off our nose, way off in the distance, moving up towards that part of the world at the end of the Po Valley, and we bombed bridges and buildings and things and cut rails. We did a lot of these things. It was kind of exciting flying. We were always very busy, going as fast as we could go someplace. And to carry this story now, they moved us up to France, and there's a whole group, and we ended up in a place that was just about 10 miles south of Nancy, France, the area of World War II memories and all that sort of thing. And now we were up there in Germany flying. It was an entirely different affair. We just didn't go poking around looking for trouble. The trouble was there. And the Germans in great numbers and defending their borders. And then our job was to support, and you've heard of General Patton, who had an army, Third Army, and we'd report, we fly up there and say, hello there, we're here. What have you got for us? This was sort of the forerunner of how this was handled in Vietnam very efficiently. We were learning. We put our own men on the ground with the Army, and we'd arrive armed and ready to do something, but unknown what the target would be. And we'd call our control man, and the Army would say, well, we want you to do thus or thus. And we discuss things and decide how to do it safely so we didn't hurt any of our people. And away we go and do our thing. And the memory I have of that war over there was always on the run, flying as fast as we could all over the face of Europe and back, and trying very hard to keep track of where you should be at all times. A war like that, we didn't have systems like radio beacons and so forth, things on the ground. You better know where you are so you can get back home again safely. We noticed that on the roads beneath were just vehicles by the huge numbers. Obviously they were ours, and it was the day that Third Army crossed the Rhine River, 26 March 1945. And we were told to get lost, hold someplace. And then we were directed to go to a place in Germany and hold over a spot and do some observing in Stuttgart, which is east of the Rhine. All of a sudden it got very, very difficult because our leader had led us over a German battery of anti-aircraft guns that obviously had been pulled back. And they just opened up on us, and we just go get them. All we did was poke our noses, shoot, drop our loads, and defend ourselves if we could. Well, I was hit. My airplane was hit. And it hit in front of the cockpit area and exploded and knocked the oil filler cap off. Well, engine oil is vital to the running of an airplane. So I quick turned it around, and of course I didn't mention that on the way to Stuttgart we'd been east of the Rhine River, which was enemy territory. So now I turned my airplane around and was still flying and heading back towards home over in France. And the poor old thing could tell me as I was going along that it wasn't going to make it. And but there was an undercast, and I was not sure exactly where the Rhine River was. So I just kept motoring to the west. We have what are called wingmen to help you out, but in that little confrontation that we had there, my wingman lost me, and I lost him, so I'm pretty much alone up there. Well, I just kept the airplane going until finally its airspeed diminished to a dangerous point, and decisions had to be made, and I made a parachute jump. Well, that could be a happy ending, but yeah, it was in a sense. But I collided with the horizontal stabilizer of the airplane with my right leg and was injured. However, I floated to the ground, landed alive, and then I wondered, well, where am I in Germany? On the right side or the wrong side? And I waited with all sorts of thoughts. you know, would be friend or foe. Finally, I saw an American Jeep thumping along, coming to pick me up. And it was a happy sight. These were combat engineers of the U.S. Army. And they bundled me up, and I remember took us to a German farmhouse. The farmhouse frau was we were all in the kitchen with 3 Army non-battle casualties. They'd fallen someplace and were hurt, but they count still the same. And we waited for transportation to someplace, hopefully. The fellows had bound me up somewhat, and I was very happy to be alive, to say the least, with friends. And then the story goes on to a successful end. An ambulance came, and we went to a thing that was very popular in television in those days called the MASH. You know, there it was, the tents and the lights, you know, and all the doctors and the nurses and all the rest of the gang. We came back on a ship called the Aquitania, the sister ship of the Lusitania, which is an old ship full of wounded, you know, and we got back to New York finally, and there was a wonderful song going on. I'll always remember it as loud as you could hear it. Never heard it before, called Rum and Coca-Cola, thundering away. Well, they came and took us over to a hospital. Oh, that MASH operation. It was so nice to see these pretty nurses there, and we'd been away from the things. Quite frankly, when I did, they dropped me off there in kind of the front yard. It was misty. It was kind of raining a little. And of course, with just a broken leg and so forth, my priority was very low, I'm thinking there of you. Of course, I was able to take my parachute, bundle it up with me, and the nurses were just delighted to have it because they were made of silk. I guess they had plans of some sort, but they cut it all up, you know, and helped each other. And it was fun. They used me sometimes. You know, they had both German and American casualties in there. The severity of head, stomach, and so forth, depending on the priority. They treated whoever showed up hurt. And they put me by, still on a cot. They carried me around a bit, you know. When they had lines of something going into, what do they call this? I don't know. But occasionally you have to kind of tweak them to make sure the fluid is going in the right place. And let me do this with some Germans that were in very bad shape. And I just had memories of not knowing what I was doing, and I don't know if I hurt them or not, but they may not have survived, I can't say. But that was that wonderful operation, just like it was in the movies, you know. A gang of dedicated people just working around the clock. It's quite a memory. We went on from there. They put us on board of transport airplanes. The bumpy weather got us over to England in their system. And then I was able to graduate to a pair of crutches and be able to get around a little bit. And then the memory while I was there of FDR dying and how distressed England was at his death. They really did worship the man, I'm sure. And I went to a service the hard way. crutches. Wasn't anybody pushing anybody around, I guess. And then I mentioned that we ended up finally up there in Glasgow, Scotland, and on the ship and then back to the United States. Yeah, the Purple Heart. Well, one thing about the Purple Heart, I earned it. All of the rest of those roses, the ribbons you see that Sue brought in here, wherever they're service things. I didn't qualify for Korea because I got out of there before the war. And I wasn't there long enough to qualify, I guess, as a theater. But there's a whole bunch of real tough memories at that tour, brief as it was. I think the hardest things for me to remember and how difficult it was is learning to fly. You call primary flying. And I can remember we were out there in the high country of West Texas and flying a thing called a PT-19 open cockpit thing in the winter. And I'd never been in an airplane in my life, which meant they had to teach me basic push, pull, you know, and no matter what they wanted, I could, in my mind, I just couldn't catch up with what they wanted to teach me. It seemed so hard, and it was hard to learn every little thing. So you're worried about every day, will I be here tomorrow? Will they wash me out? And I can feel in my mind, you know, I don't know that'd be good here, but I did make what the first minimum. If you didn't fly solo after 8 or 9 hours, they began to wonder about you, you know, and so on. I remember he said, okay, you're on your own. Oh boy, you know. And I survived that. And then we went on. And every day was a sort of another trial. And as a matter of fact, one recommended a check ride for me, and I figured, well, that's the end of the world. But they gave me a ride, and they passed me, thank you. It seemed to me at that time in flying, all pilots who had never flown, it's a long process because about 52 different things that should be done. You know, you try to remember them all at the same time. And that was the hardest time, and to get by primary training successfully was a big sigh of relief for me. Because we lost quite a few guys. They, you know, they just, sorry, you can't hack it. You're out of here. And we didn't want to get washed out, for heaven's sake. And what did we do after that? We went on to then, they call it basic training, but this is another airplane. And it was still fairly simple in instrumentation. But now, the difference was, primary we had civilian instructors and everything, civilian operation. But now we were exposed to the military, and our instructors were military pilots. Different approach to how to fly was there. So we could get airplanes up and down now. We were introduced to something that was so hard, like formation flying. We all used to just sort of flying by ourselves in little airplanes. And the instructor, I can still remember, the leader here, get me there and say, okay, Hurlbutt, hold it there, you know, okay. Hard, that was so hard to learn, oh goodness gracious. But every time I got my knuckles cracked, I learned something. Pretty soon, we were doing that routinely. This is what we do. Once you're in the military, really, you never fly alone again, though you're in a single engine airplane. You're always, if you're on the board for a mission of some kind, it's you and somebody else, probably another student, but you're always together. Getting here, where you go, it's always, you're never alone. I was a good pilot, but I had guys that they were so well trained, they just instinctively they could do things that were extraordinarily gifted pilots. I mean, how many Charles Lindberghs can you have, you know? I fit right in the middle there. There were some maneuvers that I didn't want to do, so I didn't do them. The thing called a slow roll, where you move like so, on an axis and not rubber down. The problem with that is, at that time, you know, we chewed gum, we smoked cigarettes, we did nuts and bolts. You get the airplane upside down, you got a face full of trash there, you know. And I hated that. You know, I concentrated on coordinated maneuvers. I could show you a beautiful barrel roll, for example. Just down, up and up and up and up and up and up, and always pressed in your seat, very comfortable. You end up where you started, literally. That was my specialty. Usually, when you're flying from sand there, you don't have time to just ponder a pretty sunset or something. You got a mission you're doing, to go in some place you're doing something. And you always seem to be working. Happy moments flying, I guess I had them. But then again, you have a feel for the weather and the knowledge of what's going on up there in the sky. You know, I entered the jet age there in the 50s when they brought me back to active duty. And we were the first ones, at that time, I was an instructor pilot there in Selma, Alabama. It was wonderful duty. Oh, gee, this is great. All we did was fly, you know. Didn't stay there very long because sand got moved me on. But we got those jets, and then we had to learn real fast because that was a different type of machine to run. You know, we're used to all these flips and flops and fancy maneuvers that the little airplanes could do with fighters. And then you got the T-33, which is a training jet. And just overnight, they gave us a quick tour and said, now you're an instructor. What? Me? That's the P-47 there. And of course, these are air medals. These were things about every 10 missions, generally, they gave you an air medal. But the Purple Heart, distinguished unit, I was there, presidential combination for that period. Anyone a member of the unit, we were there. The important thing is to remember your veterans. Remember them